Hello, I'm Johnny from Dicebreaker, and this is Set a Watch, a game you may remember from an absolutely disastrous Let's Play Wheels and I had on the channel a few weeks ago.
Let me kill that. If that's a summon card, I'm ending the video. It's a goddamn summon card! It's a goddamn summon card, Johnny!
As painful as that Let's Play was, and believe you me, it was very painful, by the end of that recording I knew I really liked Set a Watch, and since then it's safe to say the Dicebreaker team has played a lot of this little co-op game. With that in mind then, why have we waited so long to review it? Simply put, we wanted to make sure the balance was right. In our first few games we were either walking it with relative ease or getting absolutely stomped. Now, was that something to do with us or something hard-baked into the game itself? That's the big question we're going to answer in this review, but first, let's talk about exactly what Set a Watch is and why we were so powerfully drawn to it in the first place. Set a Watch is a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players in which, actually, you've already won. Your plucky band of 4 adventurers have already defeated the big bad they set out to vanquish, the unhallowed have been slain, and now their vile minions are determined to take their revenge and summon them back to the land of the living. The only question now is whether you'll live long enough to enjoy your victory or die in the attempt. Each of the game's 9 rounds is split into 2 phases. First, the 3 dice belonging to each adventurer are rolled. Then the players choose one adventurer to stay back at camp and keep those home fires burning. The other 3, meanwhile, will head out to the edge of the camp in order to battle a queue of monsters as they emerge from the darkness. The player staying at camp can spend their 3 dice on different actions. They can chop wood, helping keep the fire healthy and potentially revealing more enemies at a time, for instance. They could check the map in order to influence what location the party visits next, and therefore how tough they'll find the next round. They could swap out one of their ability cards for another, changing their loadout to better suit their purposes, or most importantly, they can heal up, refreshing exhausted ability cards and generally giving themselves and others a better chance of surviving the next battle. There are 8 potential actions to take in camp, so with only 3 dice to spend, you're going to have to make some hard choices. But generally speaking, the camp phase is the nice bit where you get to mitigate some of the damage from the previous round and increase your chances of making it through the next one. It should also be noted that each character has a unique camp action that's a bit more powerful than the others. The warrior, for example, generates 4 wood instead of 2 when visiting the woodpile, while the ranger can rearrange the top 4 cards of the creature deck in order to provide the best possible start in the coming combat round. Once the camp phase is complete, it's time to fight some horrible beasties. Each location card determines how many enemies from the deck must be fought, and it also introduces a variable that lasts for the entire round. Forest creatures might have a bigger health pool, for example, or each adventurer might be able to increase the value of their lowest die by 1. You defeat enemies either through direct attacks, i.e. assigning a die to an enemy and taking off hit points equal to its value, or you can use a die to activate one of your character powers. Some of these are, quite frankly, astounding. The Wizard's Curse card, for instance, can defeat any enemy with an attack die already assigned to it. So if you're facing an Ember Drake with a health pool of 12, you can attack it for 1 hit point, stick another die on the Curse card, and there you have it. 1 dead Ember Drake. If you don't want to spend a die on an ability, however, or if you've already spent a die on one and you're desperate to use it again, you can instead exhaust the card. This allows you to use the ability again that turn, but you're effectively taking damage in order to pay for it. When an ability card is exhausted, it cannot be used again until it's healed, either by somebody using the camp's heal ability, or through your adventurer resting at camp. If you ever reach a stage whereby all of the character cards on the 3 adventurers out in the field are exhausted, the party falls in battle and the game is lost. This is especially relevant considering every enemy that stands undefeated at the end of a combat round will do damage equal to this number in the corner. For every point of damage that gets through, you have to exhaust an adventurer card. Oh, and every enemy that gets through also goes into the horde, and you have to face every single creature in the horde in the final round, in addition to the number of enemies already dictated by the card. So, tempting as it is to exhaust a card for another use of that tasty ability, it may come back to bite you later on. Dealing with your enemies then is a simple enough concept. You make the fire as big as possible in order to reveal more enemies, then you assign your dice to those enemies and to your abilities as efficiently as you can in order to take them out. Oh, brave adventurer, if only it were that simple. Your enemies have a few tricks of their own, hidden up their sleeves, or in the folds of their wings, or in the internal pockets of their festering robes. You get the idea. Some of these have traits that are always active. The metal golem, for example, prevents you doing any direct attacks to monsters that are behind it in the queue, forcing you to deal with it before having a go at anything else. The forest giant, meanwhile, has a health pool of 7 plus the health value of whatever creature is behind it. Enemies can also have reveal powers. These are effects that come into play the moment a card is flipped face up. The vampire, for example, steals the die with the highest available value in order to form its health pool. A horrible effect that prevents you from using that die at all for the rest of the round, even in the event of the vampire's death. Goblins, meanwhile, go straight to the front of the line when revealed, which might cause a creature's first position power to come into effect for a second time if you aren't careful. Talking of first position powers, these are effects that come into play if the enemy in question ever makes it to the front of the line, again forcing you to prioritise that target in order to prevent the situation from getting any worse. A fell beast will force you to draw a creature and add it to the very front of the queue, for example, while the Ember Drake, which I hate with a burning passion, will exhaust an ability card and knock 3 points off the bonfire. A sufficiently nasty set of abilities under any circumstances, I think you'll agree, but what's worse is some of these abilities can work together in horrible, vindictive tandem, offering little snippets of card synergy that, for want of a better word, can be a royal pain in the arse. And that's before we even get on to the summon cards. Depending on the difficulty level you're attempting, the enemy deck in Setter Watch includes 1, 2, 3, or 4 summon cards. When you reveal a summon card, you have to immediately exhaust an adventurer card, then replace the summon card with the top card from the Unhallowed deck. The summon card is then discarded, waiting to be shuffled back into the deck so it can pop up all over again. The Unhallowed are particularly horrible enemies with a big old health pool and a unique effect that ties nicely in to each one's particular theme. The Wyvern Rider immediately summons all Wyverns currently in the discard pile behind it, for instance, while the Pyromancer joins the end of the line and then knocks the firewood down by 1 for each creature defeated before them, which can be absolutely devastating. They're basically mini-bosses, and you will learn to hate each one individually during your time with Setter Watch. So that is a fairly comprehensive view of how Setter Watch works, and for the most part, it's a corker. The core experience is just really good fun. Discovering you have just enough dice in play to defeat the queue without taking damage is immensely satisfying, while the ability cards encourage lateral thinking, and finding a creative solution to what initially seemed like an impossible situation is a genuine thrill, really emphasising the game's theme of a band of grizzled warriors standing together against the darkness. Meanwhile, it makes everybody around the table feel pretty clever to boot, unless it goes terribly, of course. One thing I particularly like about Setter Watch, however, is the way each player gets a corner of the game world. Each person gets their own adventurer to control, and they get final say over how their dice and cards are used. The fact you have to pick up your dice and assign them physically goes a long way towards stopping any one player from calling all the shots and basically taking other players' turns for them. Nobody enjoys playing with a co-op quarterback after all, and while this is a cooperative experience at heart, Setter Watch does a good job of enshrining each player's ability to make their own decisions about how their character acts. Set a Watch is atmospheric, engaging, and it comes in a small enough box that I'm tempted to shove it in my bag pretty much whenever I'm going out to meet my friends. With all that said, however, we still haven't answered the question raised at the very start of the review. Is Set a Watch a balanced game that's hard on new and inexperienced players, or is it simply inconsistent? For my money, there is definitely a balancing issue at play with Set a Watch, meaning sometimes it's hard to find the middle ground whereby you don't either get lucky and breeze through the game without any difficulty at all, or you get grabbed by the ankles and smashed against the nearest wall repeatedly until you inevitably fall under a tidal wave of adversaries. While there are some knife-edge games that you'll either win or lose by a hair's breadth, the experience on the whole can be a bit inconsistent. And a big part of that is how much stuff is left to chance. The character abilities you start with, the strength of your rolls, the enemies you face, the traits and reveal powers they have and whether or not they interact, the locations you draw, the unhallowed you face and in what order, all of these elements are left to chance, and your ability to influence them only goes so far. The more you play, of course, the better you learn to prioritize your enemies and use your abilities and dice to the best possible effect. But even with experienced players using their camp actions optimally, the difficulty can be a bit swingy. And there is a definite sense that when a game goes south, it goes south fast. There's also the fact that some of the heroes are, quite simply, far better than others. Some of the character abilities too are far stronger than the other ones in the mix, and as interesting as it can be to switch things up, it's hard to escape the sense that there is an ideal party composition in Set a Watch, and that you either have it or you don't. In spite of these rough edges, however, I still really like Set a Watch. Over the course of play, you're going to have matches that feel unfairly, preposterously weighted against you, and you'll also have games that feel suspiciously straightforward. In spite of this, though, the base game is undeniably good fun, and it is worth it for those moments when you have a little breakthrough and you finish a combat round that frankly seemed completely impossible at the outset. So Set a Watch isn't perfect, but it is an extremely strong showing nonetheless. It's a little box that packs a lot of punch, and even with the swingy difficulty, I can see myself playing it for a long time. It's also worth noting that it plays exactly the same way whether you've got one person or four around the table, making it a strong recommendation for anybody looking for a fun and atmospheric single-player experience. And ultimately, even if the Beastmaster character is one of the weakest in the game, being able to tame a wolf and then fire it at one of your enemies like a furry guided missile is always going to be quite funny. Anyway, so that's Set a Watch, but what do you think? Are you tempted to pick it up, or does the unpredictability simply put you off? Let us know in the comments below. Hopefully you enjoyed this review. If you did, there are loads of other videos from Dicebreaker for you to watch. Some of them should be on screen now, including the disastrous Let's Play I mentioned at the top of this video. Do give one of those a click, do like, subscribe, and ring the bell icon so you don't miss anything else from Dicebreaker, but most importantly, thank you very much for watching, and have a lovely day.